Supply chain management in the post-COVID era. During the COVID-19 pandemic, supply chain personnel faced unprecedented challenges, hastily revised demand forecasts, pandemic-induced trade disruptions, port congestion, and all-around chaos. This era tested a generation of professionals who had spent decades working in a global marketplace characterized by Swiss-like stability. Despite the trying conditions, the supply chain was stressed but not broken. Managing such circumstances is what supply chain personnel pride themselves on doing well. However, the post-COVID era has introduced a new complexity: spiraling costs. Inflation is a more formidable adversary, one that supply chain personnel were not as well prepared to manage. The problem has its roots in the Japanese production methods adopted by American companies and then globally in the late 1970s. These approaches involved integrating supplier personnel earlier in the design stages of product development, pursuing stable supplier relationships, and negotiating long-term supply contracts. The last feature is particularly important today. Negotiating long-term supply contracts is like playing Jenga. The parties carefully maneuver to remove pieces deemed prejudicial or unnecessary, stopping only when disaster looms. One of the easiest terms to agree upon in a long-term contract is an annual price adjustment for the goods or services. This mechanism, established over the past decade, is now causing complications. These automatic price inflators typically come in two forms. The first allows the supplier to increase prices annually by a specified percentage, often up to 5%. This method is suitable when sourcing the same item from multiple suppliers. For industrial and high-volume manufacturing, the adjustment is often tied to a price index published by a reliable government office. Agreeing to a price inflator is straightforward for several reasons. Without such a mechanism, suppliers would anticipate long-term cost increases by overpricing in the short term. Additionally, revenues tend to increase over time, which should help maintain a purchaser's margins. Moreover, for the entire careers of today's senior business leaders, inflation has been low and stable, making these adjustments of little consequence. Until now. In an environment of high inflation, these price-adjusting terms can cause a sustained chain reaction, further intensifying inflation. While central bankers attempt to throttle consumer spending, built-in cost inflators continue to cascade down the supply chain, exacerbating the issue. Supply chain managers are now tasked with fighting these increases, despite contract provisions that permit suppliers to raise prices. This is a tall order. Some managers are making slight headway by bargaining for unspecified future considerations, but often these efforts are fruitless. The next option is to abandon long-established trading relationships in search of less costly alternatives. However, this strategy also involves additional costs and considerable risks associated with unfamiliar suppliers. There is a linear relationship between cost and quality, and the trade-off isn't always appreciated, meaning cost avoidance could be illusory. What will be the consequence of this episode? Expect that price inflators used in past contracts will be more carefully considered in the future. More precisely, contracts will continue to be long-term, but annual price adjustment provisions may be replaced with less frequent options, such as every other year. This will act as a kind of circuit breaker, curbing the amplification of cost pressures during inflationary periods.